So, for those of you who don't know, my name is Michael Burnett, and like many of you, I showed up today to support a special candidate, and if you don't already know, this particular candidate is particularly special to me. She's my mom. My introduction here is going to take us back to 2022, before she was a candidate, back when there were conversations stirring in the Indiana House Caucus Party, St. Joseph County, and the state party, and beyond, about finding someone to run in House District 5. My family's home district bordering South Bend. Of course, my mom's name came up in those conversations, given the fact that she helped to lead Penn High School's graduation rate and take it from 74% to 96% in just 5 years. That's the district's largest high school, also the one I graduated from. Not to mention her 7.5 years of experience on the county's Board of Health, which included the pandemic years. We'd say something like, "Sure, Mom, you'd be a great candidate, but," and we'd give an excuse like that would be a lot of work. Not that my mom was a stranger at hard work, though. After all, I do remember the evenings she'd drive back and forth to Kalamazoo, Michigan to get her PhD, all the while working at Penn High School while I was there and my older sister and then my younger sister still at home. And she did that for 4 years. In fact, I grew up with stories about my mom working for the CDC, where she was out in the field on the front lines stopping the spread of STDs in Chicago, which meant tracking people down in their places of work and their apartments and testing them on the spot. I remember one story in particular, and many of them went like this, where she called someone down from their apartment building, and while they sat on the hood of her car, she drew their blood.
True story.
It is, except this person was a heroin addict. So when she couldn't find the vein, they found one for her.
Oh.
So what's the takeaway there? It's that hard work wasn't going to stop her, but my family and I worried that she would face a lot of negativity. We asked how we stay focused on what matters. But we knew that negativity couldn't stop her. At the dinner table growing up, Mom would insist we share our favorite part of the day, even on the days we thought were the worst, because being grateful was the point. And there was always something to be grateful for. Here's another objection we had. How will you communicate your positions in a way that people will understand? How will you make them care? But then I remembered the time we went tailgating at Notre Dame, and my mom said, "Before we get started, we're gonna see a lecture, and I'm the one giving it." The lecture was all about lead poisoning prevention, not exactly the topic you want to go into before tailgating with your friends and family. And some people are dismissive of lead. Lead is everywhere, it's unavoidable. But then she shared a story about how lead can multiply issues within people's lives. There was a sick little boy in South Bend, and it took his mom a year of going to different doctors to finally figure out her boy had been lead poisoned. And that same boy would have disabilities for the rest of his life. But in that process, her marriage went through a lot of hardships, ended up failing, and she had defaulted on her mortgage. I was captured by the story. Immediately, everybody in the room understood what lead poisoning can do. And we all wanted to know more. And she knew that because she planned it that way. My mom is a really good storyteller. Still, we let the excuses flow until a pivotal moment. It was a pivotal moment for the campaign and a devastating turn for the country. Have you ever received bad news that makes your heart drop? You know that feeling? That's how we felt when the Dobbs decision leaked and we knew that Roe v. Wade would be overturned. I thought instantly of my sisters, my cousins, my friends, and the millions of girls and women, like many of you here today, who now have less freedom than you did before, less choice than our mothers and grandmothers who fought and voted for that freedom. Well, that's when everything changed. It would be a challenge, but my mom taught us that we don't shy away from challenges. It would take hard work, but my mom works hard, and she won't be alone. It was no longer, maybe you could run, but it was, "Mom, I think it's time," and then, "Will you do it? Will you run?" And she said yes. But actually, she said something more like, "Well, I would have to start setting up this infrastructure and then call so-and-so about this and so-and-so about that," which, if you don't already know, is classic Heidi. And where before our instinct was to protect her, like you would for your loved one, in the face of something we knew would be difficult, We instead started to welcome the idea of sharing her with our community, because wherever she goes, positive outcomes follow. There's more organization, more thoughtfulness, kindness, love, and more fun. That's an extraordinary thing to have in a mother. Now imagine what she could do for Indiana. Keep it up.
Michael's got my vote.
That's awesome. That's hard to follow that.
Yeah.
It's kind of emotional, right? My gosh, I am so happy to be here with all of you. First, I have to give a huge thank you to Jim and to Carrie Diller for opening up their home, and for Devin and Michael, because they've been working on getting this all together and inviting all of you guys and communicating with my team. So thank you, thank you, thank you for this opportunity to be here and be with your friends. So I am Heidi Beidinger, and I am running to be the next representative of the Indiana House District 5. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, tell you a little bit about the campaign, tell you about the villain in this story, and then I'm going to finish it by telling you what the vision is, what we actually all can do together. So my values evolved from a really early age. I'm the proud daughter of immigrant parents. My mom grew up in Holland and my dad grew up in Austria, and they both grew up there during World War II. And my parents told us stories. This is where the storytelling comes from. They taught me and my sisters the importance of family and community because they understood deeply why we have to care about each other. My mom would tell stories about how there were always strangers at their door. There were always extra people there for dinner, and that they had to start peeling potatoes right after breakfast because it took that long to get that many potatoes ready for all the extra people who were going to be sitting at the dinner table. My dad tells a bit of a different story. His story has a lot more cruelty in it, poverty. The German soldiers occupied his particular village. He talked about stories about how they would be sitting in their home getting ready to have the one meal that they got to have that day. And people would come into their home, no knocking, no nothing, right? Take what was on the table and literally just walk out the door. Poverty, chilling stories that were told to my sisters and I. But there's an upbeat to it. They also figured out how to get around this. They started digging holes and burying food, so that when it happened to a neighbor or a family member, they were ready for it. They could dig up that food and deliver it to their family and friends. And so this is the kind of stories that my sisters and I grew up with, and this is what it means to be caring for your family and caring for community. So it's kind of no surprise that I end up in public health, right? With a background like that. So my career has focused on public health, education, and policy. Public health is all about prevention and protection. Education, of course, is the hallmark of a democracy. And finally, policy is how we create a future together that lasts. I've never shied away from the tough stuff, as Michael told you about. During my times at CDC, by the way, I have a colleague that I worked with at CDC, Michael, Phoebe. While I was working at Cook County Jail, I implemented a universal syphilis screening program for women at the jail. This was really important because when women are booked at a jail, they tend to be booked on lesser charges, which means that they also bond out really easily and really, really quickly. So while we were doing an amazing job of getting them all tested, you have to draw their blood, getting them all tested, the results didn't show up for about 48 hours. So all of these women were then already released. My team has to go out in the field, find them, time-consuming, et cetera, plus all the loss to follow up. So we created a universal screening clinic right in intake. We set up a laboratory, you drew the blood, you did the test, and now we knew. And the very next morning at 7 a.m., they were in the clinic and they got to be treated. We went from something like a 40% treatment rate up to a 95% treatment rate. It was wildly successful, and we went on the road to tell people about it and so forth. The kicker is that this all had to be done during the evening hours because that's when intake is. So we had to be down there from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. So this was after the workday, and oh, by the way, I was also pregnant with Sophie, and I was also getting my master's in public health at the exact same time. So lots and lots of things happening. I don't shy away from the hard work, and this is why I am running. Indiana no longer represents, though, what I hold dear, what so many of you hold dear. And because you all are friends with either me, Michael, the Dillers, and so forth, I know that these are things that are important to you guys as well. So in 2022, after Roe was overturned, Indiana moved really, really quickly to be the first state to have an abortion ban. The governor called special session. It lasted 2 weeks. They passed one of the most restrictive abortion bans in the country. And they were so proud of that work that the governor signed that bill almost in the middle of the night on Friday night. Closed door, no media. That's the kind of Indiana that we live in. That was Friday night. Saturday morning, I come downstairs and my girls are sitting on the sofa, and Kate, the youngest, is sitting there and she's got tears in her eyes and she's looking at her phone. I'm like, oh my God, you know, what else now has happened? And she says to me, Mom, why should I go back to school in the fall? Indiana doesn't value women. I was like, oh my God, how am I supposed to answer this? I need to have something really great to say. But my oldest daughter, Sophia, didn't miss a beat. She looked me straight in the eye and she said, Mom, it's your time. I had to do it. There was no way around it. I can hardly ever get through that story. But the amazing thing was, we had 4 months to stand up a campaign, and we did. And we got our friends and our family, and they joined us, and we set up the most amazing, oh my God, I can't look at Michael. Woo! So here's what's at stake in Indiana. So much has gone wrong, and I need to tell you about a few of them. Do you know that Indiana has the dirtiest waterways in the country? Our air quality is the 3rd worst. We are a deregulated state. We call ourselves business friendly. We invite business to come in and then they use us up in Indiana. We have some of the lowest teacher pay. We have not raised our minimum wage in 15 years. Indiana has one of the highest gas taxes, most restrictive abortion ban, and Indiana's healthcare costs are among the highest in the country. And you guys, the list goes on and on. I mean, seriously, we could talk about for hours about the things that have gone wrong in Indiana. I didn't even talk about public education. So here we are, standing in California, which, of course, those of us in Indiana, this feels like the promised land. I know that not every state is perfect, right? But for those of us who live in Indiana, we look at California and think it's pretty damn close to being perfect here. California values culture, your environment, you have good paying jobs, you have clean energy, and I just learned at the breakfast table that fast food workers in April are now making $20 an hour, which is just amazing. The advocacy that happens here in California is so unusual to those of us who are living in Indiana. So do you know how much we pay fast food workers in Indiana? $7.25. $7.25, and that has gone unchanged in 15 years, even though every single year somebody proposes that we need to increase the minimum wage. California is ranked in the top 10 for healthiest states. Indiana is ranked in the bottom 10. Our state governments could not be more different. Indiana's government is solely focused on the short-term gains and money. That's it. When you analyze what's happening here in California, you can see that California is focused on short-term gains as well as the long-term. You make decisions that impact people right now, but you also make decisions that will impact for 10, 20, 30 years. That's not how Indiana operates. We don't talk like that. But Democrats in Indiana want more, and we're willing to fight for it, and we're working like hell to do it. Indiana has long been considered a flyover state. You likely don't hear about us because what happens in Indiana literally stays in Indiana. But meanwhile, families, women, children are suffering, and what's worse is that their suffering is now normalized. People are not asking for more. People are not talking about increasing minimum wage. They're not talking about why our environment is so dirty. It's become normalized. We're just accepting it. I do have some good news, folks. It's coming. We are doing something about it, and not only something, we're doing a whole lot of something about it. My district is winnable. It just hasn't been properly campaigned in like the last 20 years because we've had Republican control and we have really significant gerrymandering. I've assembled a 16-member leadership team, and I can honestly say there is nothing like it in the state. I am told over and over again that we are so organized and that we have people who are actually taking responsibility for huge chunks of this campaign. I've invited friends and colleagues into leadership roles so we can flip this district. And because they said yes, we've created this amazing campaign. We're knocking on doors and leading the state, by the way, in door knocking. We're phone banking, postcard writing, fundraising. We're crushing social media, attending events, bringing on new technology, and most importantly, having the all-important one-on-one conversations with the voters, because that's how this is going to be won. As I said, we have not properly canvassed this district in almost 20 years. The voters are outside of the loop. Our local paper is now owned by a national conglomerate. We don't have local reporting happen. The way we're going to win is one-on-one conversations. This is probably the most consequential election of my lifetime. There absolutely is nothing more important that I'm doing in my life right now than working on this campaign and flipping this district. If we flip my seat and just 3 others, we will break the supermajority in the state house for the first time in 4 years. Woo! That's right. Woo woo! The other cool thing is that I am in touch with those other campaigns that are working hard, and we are talking to each other and strategizing and so forth, because this is, we believe, the most consequential election of our lifetime. We also have something else that's unprecedented. Women have really stepped up to run in Indiana. We have a governor, we've got US Senate, Attorney General, my congressional representative, and many, many others. And with women's rights on the ballot, who better to be running in those seats? So this is it. This is the year. I ran in 2022, I'm running now. We're not leaving anything on the table. This is it. We're planning on winning this year, and we're gonna take back that house, and when we go in there in the spring, they're gonna know who worked like hell. Who worked like hell. So, I'm asking all of you to please join me, donate to me, donate again. Volunteer, get involved, hear more about what's going on, and figure out a role that you can play with us, because it all matters, and we need people from all across the country to help us to do this. And I truly believe that when we rise together to make this happen, we're going to make history in Indiana. We're going to make that national news come November. They're going to be like, what the hell happened here in Indiana? The truth is that I want us to have the freedom to have happy and healthy families. I want families to thrive in Indiana, not just exist and accept what is wrong. We can do so much more, and Hoosiers totally deserve it. So I want all of you to join me, because we're going to do this. We're going to win Indiana in November. Woo! Thank you guys. Usually when I get done at this point, maybe there's a couple of questions or something that I'd be happy. I know we were out on the porch.
Have you thought about running for president?
There may be an opening, yeah.
So I have a couple people on my team who are like, we're going to get you in the state house, and then you're going to go do X, Y, and Z. I think they should probably have a conversation with Bruce. and then we'll have more back part of the conversation.
We can take care of Bruce.
Question that I often get asked is, so how is it different from 2022 to 2024, right? So why do you think you can really win this time? And there's a couple of different answers, but I mean, the first one is that I had a much longer runway. Back in November, I started meeting with people one-on-one. I wanted to know what was important to people in my district, but I was also looking for those leaders that I could invite into leadership roles to say, come help me. Be in charge of postcards, be the data analyst, be the campaign canvasser, all of these different roles. I needed so many people. So that started in November. I've had 150 one-on-one conversations. I keep joking that I'll turn into a latte, because that's what I always get when I'm like meeting with people. But that's number one. There are just so many more people who are involved in the campaign now. But the other cool part is that a lot of new technology has come on board. So there's a company called Civitech, And Civitech actually they scrape the data and they look for people who are high propensity Democrats who are not registered. And then they target those individuals to get them to register. And then there are 3 or 4 more touches, and then they can pretty much almost guarantee that that person will get to the polls and vote. There are 2,275 of those particular people who fit that in my district. And according to their research, they can get 500 people to the polls. That's like almost my margin of error right there. So it's pretty amazing that that's available. And I have a donor in Indiana who is paying for that for me. So those are the kinds of like new things that are happening. What was another one? Geofencing. Anybody hear about geofencing? Yes. It's essentially an electronic fence, a virtual fence that's put around, like there might be an event, like let's say a Friday night high school football game. You can put an a virtual fence around there. And then I don't know how it happens, some magic, right? You wave the wand, and the company that does it can talk to people's cell phones. I don't know what it is. Somebody else here knows the technology better than I do. But the point is that the campaign then can talk to all of those telephones. And so then you can push all of your ads to that phone, and supposedly it lasts around for 7 to 10 days.
Wow.
So there's some really cool, and I happened to have that conversation at breakfast this morning with a donor who wants to pay for that for me to be able to have that technology. It's a big deal.
Tell us about your opponent.
Tell us about the opponent.
Let's
Dale.
get to the evil.
That's right. So when you're doing messaging, they say that it's the 3 V's. You start with your values, you tell them who the villain is, and then you share the vision. So the villain in the story here was Indiana, but we'll get a little more personal, and that is Dale Devon has been there for 12 years at the State House. He got into politics and he went into the county government first. He became a county councilman because he's a home builder, and he told the papers at that time that the reason he wanted to get into county government is because he was sick of the regulations around building and building codes, and he wanted to get in there to be able to change those things. That's exactly what he has been doing. There are, I don't know the exact number, but there are at least a dozen home builders, gentlemen who own home building companies, and they are all state reps. So when they vote with that in mind. Dale Devon votes against the environment. He votes against women, votes against education, votes against children. He is the chair of the Family and Children's Committee. And if you saw the kinds of things you passed, you're like, you can't imagine why a guy like that would be in charge of that. It just doesn't make any sense. It's so cruel what he comes up with and tries to get passed. He proposed a bill, I'm not going to go into the details of the foolishness of this particular bill, that his own party said, Dale, that's too extreme. We're not even going to, it never even got a hearing. So this is the kind of guy he is. And so in some ways, it makes it easier to run. It's such a stark contrast. The choice, right? You don't like the environment, you don't like public education, you don't like women, you don't like children, you don't like families, vote for Dale. You think we should have better education, you think we should have safe and healthy and affordable housing, you think that children should be protected in the state of Indiana, come vote for me. That's it. That's the difference between Dale and I. Indiana, it's the 3rd most unsafe place for children in the country, the 3rd worst. It's an unsafe place for children. Child abuse rates are high. Children of a certain age, the number 1 reason that they die is from gun violence. He also passed permitless carry. I mean, honestly, you could just, as I'm talking, it's like it more and more just rolls in, and I'm like, that's right, he did that, and he did that, and he did that. It's like everything that you could imagine that could go wrong in a society, he has put his signature on.
Does your opponent have a lot of money? Is he advertising a lot?
What a great, awesome question. So the way that the money works in Indiana for the Republican side is that the big corporations give the money to the state Republican Party. So right now, if you looked at at Dale's campaign finance report from the first quarter, he had like $10,000 in there. You go, oh, geez, I mean, he's got nothing. He's not going to be able to do anything. And then all of a sudden, here comes 30, here comes 50, here comes 100, and they just start dumping money in there. And then when they get done in November, if there's money left over, they take it all out. It goes back into the state Republicans' fund, because none of the Republicans own their own money. They don't do their own fundraising. Dale doesn't even do this. He doesn't knock on doors. He doesn't phone bank. They don't have to do anything because they've been we're so gerrymandered. The expectation is that he'll win. But we're going to win because we're knocking on doors. We're communicating with people. We're doing house parties. We're phone banking. We're writing postcards. We're going to write 6,000 postcards. We're going to knock on 35,000 doors. We're going to make 10,000 phone calls. And that's how you win. It's reconnecting with the voter one-on-one. That's how you get the job done. Ooh. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but we're up for it. And I'll be teaching, by the way. I also teach and do research. So I am doing research on lead poisoning that has started about 7 to 8 years ago. I have 2 students who are doing research right now during the summertime. We have a paper published a month ago for work that we're doing on lead. So it's a busy time. It's 7 days a week, about 12 to 14 hours a day. There's no downtime. I think our downtime is around like 9 o'clock at night. We'll flip on Netflix and then it's like sag, your chin drops and you're like, oh yeah, I think it's not bad. But we've only got 16 more weeks to go. So I actually feel like I can see the end, the end is in sight. And we're gonna do this. I have probably almost 12 house parties on the schedule. My sister Denise is my house party manager. So she's managing all of those kinds of things. So it's a real family affair. My other sister who lives in Chicago, she's in charge of my social media. My mom has a postcard writing team. She's 85. She's got 12 people who come over to her house. She bakes banana bread, makes coffee, and then they sit there and they write postcards. So everybody has a role to play, and everybody has stepped up in really big ways. So, any other questions? What have I missed?
What is the state of public education in Indiana right now?
Oh, yeah, we were just talking about that. So in 2023, the state passed a new law that basically overhauled public education in Indiana. They have changed the high school graduation requirements and they have dumbed them down. You no longer have to have world history. You don't have to have an art. You no longer have to study world languages. You don't have to have more than algebra, so you can actually get through high school with one math class. Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. In the same session, they also passed a law that allows 14-year-olds to work after school till 11 o'clock at night. The whole thing is that we've been so welcoming of businesses to Indiana, and what are the business owners complaining? Where are all the workers? Oh, I don't know. Where did Devin and Michael go after they graduated from college? Where did Vincent go after he graduated? You guys don't stay in the state of Indiana. We have a significant brain drain. But the business is saying we need workers. Well, the State House is making that happen by dumbing down those high school requirements, allowing kids to work. They earn money, whatever, but it's all very, very unsafe. It's very unplanned. When they wrote those graduation requirements, no teacher, no student, administrator, higher ed, the labor, the unions, none of them were consulted. That's what our state ledge does. They do everything in a vacuum. They talk to no one. They only base it on their own personal experiences, and then they make these things up as they go. It's pretty hideous. So another sense of urgency of why we have to get in there and reset these things. We have to repeal. I mean, honestly, that's what it's going to feel like. I don't know if any of you watch or follow Gretchen Whitmer, who's the governor of Michigan, and what she has been able to go in and do. I mean, they've just been repealing, and then just like broadening. They came in and repealed the right to work union law. We still have that, of course. She gave kiddos who graduate from high school, they can go to a 2-year college for free. Anybody in the state of Indiana? We don't. I said Michigan, we don't have that. She also said that all kiddos in public education will have breakfast and lunch. And in Indiana, that is not the case. That is not the case. One more thing about Dale DeBon. So he actually proposed the most strict abortion ban. He said no to rape and incest and fetal anomaly. So he said the only way that you could have an abortion in the state of Indiana is if the woman's life was in jeopardy. On the exact same day, he voted against pregnancy accommodations in the workplace. So if you are pregnant and you need an extra break, or you need a bar stool, or whatever, right? Legally, the employer can turn all of that down, and he voted for that. So he's telling you, you have to be pregnant, and I'm not gonna make anybody give any accommodations to ensure that you're having a healthy pregnancy. And oh, by the way, Indiana also has one of the highest infant mortality rates, and we also have one of the highest maternal mortality rates. A third of our counties, we have 92 of them, a third do not have an OBGYN and do not have a hospital where somebody can go and deliver. It's like we're living in a third world country, and it's normalized. We're a flyover. People don't even know that this is what's happening. And so the crew that's running right now, we're making a hell of a lot of noise. We've hired consultants who are trying to get us into the national paper and TV and so forth, so we can amplify what's happening. And of course, that's why I'm here. So that you all can share on social media. You can start following me and share that. You can donate, you can volunteer. You know, it's that important. Indiana is where the Republicans want to go. Indiana is the test case for Project 2025. You want a preview of 2025? I just described it to you. We're living it. We're like the guinea pigs. This is Project 2025 is alive and well right now in Indiana.
So they're not gonna wanna get rid of Dale then? They won't.
Oh no, they don't want to get rid of Dale. No, because he just does what the party tells him to do. Yep. He just votes along party line. He doesn't have to do much. When Roe got overturned and then they called for the 2-week session down at the state, there was a huge women's rally. And so I went down. I mean, you guys, tens of thousands of people. It was an incredible turning out, nothing like we'd ever seen in Indiana before, honestly. And I wish I'd had my phone, and I wish I'd had some foresight. Dale was leaning against a light pole. Mind you, this is like 11 o'clock in the morning, and he's smoking a cigar. It's just, it's like, it was a spectator sport for him. It was like, and it was so surreal, like, oh, we're all amped up and the emotions that we have and our daughters, and there he is, just like, wow, check y'all out, you know, this is wild. And I'm just like, how can you be so disconnected from what people need? But he is, and that's my opponent. That's who we're running against.
Was there a time when Indiana was more like California? In other words, can you say, hey, we were here, Project 2025, if you will, got implemented, and over the next 10 years, now look where we are.
Yeah, if you look to just 20 years ago, so that would have been 40 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. We had a series of Democratic governors. We actually had some of the best paid teachers. We had the best educational outcomes. We also had the cleanest air and water at that time. We had Birch Bayh, Evan Bayh was his son, O'Bannon, and then Joe McKernan became governor, and these were guys who were all progressive, and we were passing some of the most amazing stuff. And then in the last 20 years, you can see what happens, and when you're not paying attention. And I often get that. I mean, I hear that a lot. Well, I donate to the national level, and they're like, but I didn't know I had to pay attention at the local level. I hear that a lot. And so,
to that end, talk to us or me a little about how the local level might impact the national level, which we haven't talked about, which is obviously also terrifying for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's also a real pervasive, nasty perception that my vote doesn't matter in Indiana, right? We're going to go red anyway. It's going to be Trump. So why should I come out and vote? And what we have to do as candidates and our team, We have to educate the voter about why their vote matters for Indiana. On a day-to-day basis, the state legislator, they're impacting your life. At the national level, it's not Biden who's impacting us on a day-to-day basis. It's actually your state rep who is making those decisions about education and pay and working conditions and so forth. So this is the kind of education we have to do. But the thing is though, is that they're like, I mean, you honestly, you're at the door and you don't know what you're gonna get. I mean, sometimes they're like, not this time, but in 2022, they were like, there was an election this year. And you're like, wow, okay. Have to go back to square one. That's where you are, and so that's where I need to start. And then you've got other people who are like, I don't know what a state rep does. I'm not even sure I know who that is, and they've never heard of Dale. So you're always at these different levels of education, and that's why there has to be so much training. So I do a monthly volunteer training. We get pizza and treats and soda and stuff, and then we do hour-long trainings, how to talk to a voter, how to do phone banking, how to have a persuadable conversation. So if you actually get somebody who might be in the middle and they're like leaning a little bit towards you, how do you bring them along all the way? So we've been doing that since January. In Indiana, you're pretty much out on your own. There's no cavalry, nobody's coming. It's just us. And so we have to set up the entire infrastructure because it doesn't exist, which is an incredible, I mean, you're setting up a company is what you're doing. You know, I found myself, you know, like I said, I've got 18 people on my team, and then every so often I get Bruce and I'm like, oh my God, I haven't thanked them for like in the last 2 weeks. And I get busy and I start calling and I'm like, oh, that was amazing what you did. You know, it's all of it. You have to do all of it.
So is the DNC ignored, Indiana?
The DNC will invest in the state party, and the state party will tell you that they do not invest in individual candidates.
What?
They've made that a rule. They've just made it a rule that they don't invest in it. So they talk about infrastructure, and we're like, well, that's kind of funny because there's not much of an infrastructure. But there's a real poverty mindset with regard to Democrats.
They just assume they can't win.
There's a scarcity. They act like they can't change things. But the crew that's running right now, so I was just in Indianapolis last weekend at the state convention, Democratic convention, and all of us candidates were meeting and talking strategy and what we're all doing and everything. I mean, there's a real sense of despair, and it's so odd because you can get into that wallowing real quick. But then there's also this amazing like hope. We want to get the team out, God, we're knocking on doors, we're raising money, we're doing all the things that you need to do. But we're all having to do it ourselves. So the DNC gives a little bit of money to the state, and then the state, they tend to spend it on data.
Yeah.
Because we do use their data. So the DNC gives them a database, they get to buy into that, and then the candidates, by the way, we have to pay to access that data. I have to pay $250 a month to be able to access that data. It's a crazy world. It's a crazy world. So, but we've got 16 weeks to go, and I need all of your help, all of your help. So, you know, I'm not kidding, some of the easiest things is to follow me on social media, and just every time you see me, you're sharing. Because if I can get into your silo, you know what I mean? It's like I gotta get out of my own silo, and once that starts happening, that's when you hit pay dirt. That's good stuff. We were down, like I said, I was down in Indianapolis last weekend, and I was traveling with Sally, who's my good friend. She's also my social media team captain, and they were like, oh my God, you're killing it on social media. Well, Sally, for the last 16 weeks, has mapped out day to day what we are going to post about and the time that we're going to post for 16 weeks. So check out our social media. It's pretty impressive. It's the best in the state, there's no doubt about it. So we're going to do it this time.